At some point, the Houston Texans will indeed be done with Deshaun Watson. It was one of the biggest stories early in the offseason. It became a big story in a very different way as of March 16, when we became aware, thanks to Deshaun Watson's Twitter account, of the first of what would be 22 lawsuits filed against him alleging misconduct during massage therapy sessions. The Texans, for the most part, have been very, very quiet about the matter. There was a slip, there was a lapse from new coach David Culley on a podcast back in March. After that, they got David Culley on board with the talking point, which is no talking about Deshaun Watson. But Nick Caserio was on I think it's the flagship Houston sports station for the Texans, talking about Watson, and he recited the party line. But, Chris, he said something else that caught my attention. Let's listen to what Caserio had to say yesterday about Watson, and then we'll try to make sense of it.
I think we're taking it one day at a time, really control the things that we can control. I think the players have been focused on their attitude and their approach in the building, and they've handled everything, I would say, very well. Again, I don't really have any additional comments about anything. I think we're respectful of what's happening. We're respectful of the process of it and everybody that's involved. So, again, the most important thing is for all of us, our coaches and players, myself included, is to focus on the things that we can control. And as we get more information, as we get closer to training camp, then we'll try to make, the best decision for the Houston Texans, whatever that entails.
And there it is. Thanks to Seth Payne and Sean Pendergast for drawing that out of him. As we get closer to training camp, we'll try to make the best decision for the Houston Texans. What decision do you make? What decisions are available to you if you're the Texans? You keep him and see what happens. You trade him even if the 22 lawsuits aren't resolved. You trade him if the 22 lawsuits are resolved, or you cut him. Those are the four options. Cut, off the table. At a minimum, they'll trade him for whatever they can get,
no doubt,
with
right,
the 22 lawsuits pending. But, Chris, I think that the crux of this for the Texans, and this is one of the reasons why the personal lawyer for owner Cal McNair tried to broker settlement weeks ago, and eventually the Texans had to acknowledge that in an SI.com article. They don't want to have to make a decision about trading him with the 22 cases pending, because they're going to get less if they trade him then.
Definitely.
But the other side of that coin is he shows up, gets put on paid leave while the cases continue to be litigated, and they pay him $10 million this year, and he's not on the team. That's what they have to decide. Are we willing to pay him $10 million and hold the right to trade him until after the season, or do we just take what we can get for him now and let someone else pay him $10 million to potentially not play this year?
Yeah, it's a tough decision. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's the $10 million question. I don't have an answer here, but I do think that, like, what I would say with this scenario, Deshaun Watson, taking everything in, as good as he is as a football player, we've talked about it so much. He's arguably top 5 quarterback in football. If not, he's 6 or 7. I mean, he's right there. He's one of the best in the game. He's got a lot of years in his prime. If you gave me boiled it down to those two scenarios right there, Mike, and if I'm Cal McNair and Nick Caserio and I feel somewhat comfortable about whatever, that we can afford the $10 million on the commissioner exempt list, we can afford it. It's not going to be a big blow to our team this year as far as anything else or the future, then I'm holding on to Deshaun Watson for the year or to when this gets settled, because I'm not just trading Deshaun Watson to get rid of him. While, like you said, there's 22 cases pending, and now you're trading him away, and it's for who knows what at that point, because you're right, it's damaged goods to a degree. So I would be more inclined to say, you know what, we're okay at quarterback for this year. We didn't really expect to have him anyways. We're going to have him here, and then we're going to wait to the offseason until we can get multiple teams involved in this conversation and get their heads wrapped around this, and now we can start trying to get the best trade offers we can possibly get.
And my understanding is if the cases are resolved, the trade value and the trade interest is much, much higher. There still is trade interest because there are some teams out there thinking we can snatch him for a lot less than what we would have to give up if these cases weren't pending, and we're willing to pay the $10 million if it comes down to it, because that's just the investment that you pay. That's your loss leader, because you got a franchise quarterback when this stuff all goes away on the back end. And part of this too, Chris, that has vexed teams in the past as it relates to guys like Antonio Brown. The league isn't exactly forthcoming when it comes to the whole concept of whether or not it will use paid leave. Now, maybe Cal McNair has a source in the league office that will tell Cal, you know what? Yeah, we're going to end up putting him on paid leave or not. That people assume he's automatically going to be put on paid leave. He's facing no criminal charges. He has 22 lawsuits pending against him, but none of them have resulted in any type of indictment or criminal action. And when you look at the personal conduct policy, and we wrote something about this weeks ago, I looked at it, I broke it down. Now, hey, the discretion is there to do whatever they want to do, because if the commissioner's investigation results in a belief that the player may have violated the policy, he can be put on paid leave. Well, that's pretty broad. But when you remember this, Chris, Tony Busby, the lawyer for the 22 plaintiffs, at one point expressed that some of his clients who had been questioned by the league as part of their investigation felt like they weren't being respected. That tells me that they were subjected to pretty tough aggressive questions, and maybe skeptical questioning, which maybe the league thinks they didn't hold up well. Maybe the league thinks that maybe it's not as it's being told, or it doesn't rise to the level of what they think it does, and maybe they think we can't in good conscience put him on paid leave. Just because there's 22, if 22 cases individually aren't that strong, it doesn't matter if there's 22 or 222. If each one of them isn't regarded as strong, doesn't matter. No. So we've just assumed he's going to be on paid leave. I don't know that that's a fair assumption, which means, and I've made this case too, there's a chance he ends up playing for the Texans this year. He shows up thinking he's going to be put on paid leave, and he isn't.
I mean, I know, Mike. I know I've been one to say really for a while now that I think there's a faction in the league that thinks this might, get resolved the way you're talking. That's why I think there's teams that are continuing to be interested here. They maybe that they don't believe that the 22 charges are quite as severe or what they appear to, like what you're saying there. I have a hard time believing that 22 of those cases will all be, it's, not credible, or, you're questioning it, suspect there, and how they answered whatever, blah, blah, blah. I have a hard time with that. And then just history in the NFL. I mean, I feel like we've seen people go on the commissioner exempt list for far less, or at least far less as far as the surrounding circumstances and everything like that. So I'd have a hard.
But they have criminal charges.
No, you're right.
Commissioner's exempt list is typically only used when you have criminal charges.
I was specifically thinking about you're right. But I mean, we saw Ezekiel Elliott get suspended, right?
He got suspended. He wasn't put on the commissioner exempt list.
But there was no criminal charges there either, right?
And no lawsuit.
Right.
They did their investigation.
So that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
right.
but that's the actual suspension that could be imposed at the back end of the process.
Gotcha.
And I think Deshaun Watson at some point is facing, when you look at the parallels between his situation and Ben Roethlisberger's from 11 years ago,
right.
I think at a minimum he's facing some type of intervention by the league that would include a suspension. That's when it's all said and done. Paid leave is the thing that they basically use to take the heat out of the hot kitchen. It's a PR device. We can't have someone who's been accused of these heinous crimes or serious misconduct on the field during our games. So we're going to take that guy, we're going to put him on the sideline, we're going to put him out of the building, we're going to leave him home, and he's still going to get paid. And the league has always believed and argued and contended that that's not punishment of the player, which is a ridiculous proposition. Football players want to play football. Football players are chasing their legacy. Just because they get their money doesn't make them feel like they've not been punished. But the league has always thought, no big deal. No big deal. We're not punishing the guy.
Right.
Yes, you are punishing the guy. But they're willing to use it because they don't want to have that guy in the building, on the sideline, on the field, and have people
attached
noticing.
To the shield. Yeah.
Here's the guy. Here's the
Right.
guy that's been accused of these things, even though he's supposedly innocent until proven guilty. We don't want him around just because of the accusations. It really is wrong when you think about it. It
Yeah,
really
it
is.
Yeah.
So much for innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, right.
But they claimed, they do their threshold investigation. If it's going to be fair, and if they come to the conclusion that we don't think this is the big deal that the individuals allege it to be, we've done enough of an investigation and come to the conclusion that, there's only 2 of the 22 that are claiming any type of forcible misconduct. And we don't know whether or not they've cooperated so far.
Right.
We don't know which of the ones have spoken. There's a way through these weeds. If the league does a fair and appropriate job of applying its policy, there is a way that he doesn't get put on the commissioner exempt list. And, if the league is willing to tell the Texans, maybe the league is willing to tell some other team that would then trade for him, knowing that he's not going to be on the commissioner exempt list, and we're comfortable with him being on the field this year.
Yeah, well, then open up the floodgates, or at least the teams that have any questions about, their quarterback situations in general. I mean, I think if we got close enough here and you got to at least training camp within the first week to 10 days of training camp, really? I mean, if this became, okay, wait, it seems like the Deshaun Watson thing is going to get settled, or, there's light at the end of the tunnel, then I think you're going to see a team like Miami and Denver jump back in the conversation. I do. I would expect that. He's too good. It's like Aaron Rodgers, like we talked about. I mean, once he becomes available, teams are going to come out of the woodworks trying to figure out how they can figure out to get a guy like this. So it's all going to be dependent on where he stands with the league and everything like that. But all right, just getting back to the original question, because I would like to hear your opinion on this too a little bit. With him in the commissioner exempt list, right, and all that stuff. Say it does go down that way, Mike. It's they don't quite have it figured out. He shows up at Texans training camp, like you said. They said, go home, you're on paid leave, blah, 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 whatever. I mean, if there was teams that were still interested in trading at that point, if you're the Texans, would you do it at that point? Would you? Or would you say, you know what, we're just going to hold on to the year like I said and just go, we'll bite the bullet on the $10 million and we'll wait till we can really strike it rich next year?
Well, the Texans were the ones who basically, gave away a second-round pick to get $16 million off their books.
Yeah, they started this trend, right?
Right. To avoid paying $16 million to Brock Osweiler, they gave up a second-round pick. So, to avoid paying $10 million to Deshaun Watson, knowing that he's never going to play for you again anyway, what would you take for Deshaun Watson, knowing that you once gave up a 2 to avoid paying a guy $16 million? I think that's part of the analysis, and
Sure.
That's the reality. These draft picks have a cash value, and everyone is going to view it differently, but I think that will help them get to a point where they can assess the situation and make, as Nick Caserio said, the best decision for the Houston Texans. It's going to depend upon, most importantly, are the cases settled? Are they not settled? And maybe as we get closer to camp, Deshaun Watson and his lawyer Rusty Hardin are thinking, maybe we don't need to get these settled. At some point, I think it's fair for Watson, Hardin, Texans, Eagles, Broncos, Dolphins, because I think those are the 3 teams that would be inclined to say to the league, you can't just hold this over Deshaun Watson's head, because you're holding it over our heads too. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do this season with our football teams. So you're either going to put him on the commissioner exempt list or you're not. Don't play the Antonio Brown game. Now, I think they did it to Antonio Brown because it was a way to keep him out of the league without putting him on an unpaid suspension. He's available. The Patriots cut him.
Right.
He'd been accused of some wrongdoing
There's a
that
few
the league
things.
hadn't fully investigated.
Right.
So there are multiple things.
Right.
So all the league has to say is, well, we don't know if we're putting him on the commissioner exempt list, and it scared everyone away. As a practical matter, 14-game unpaid suspension.
Yeah.
I think it's different with Deshaun Watson because the Texans are on the hook for $10 million, and the Texans are in a position where they can trade him. And, oh, by the way, he is a pretty exciting player. Whatever the league has done by way of investigating this, if they are comfortable with Deshaun Watson playing, they need to tell the Texans and any other interested team, yeah, he's you know what, he's fine. Or just announce to the world, we've investigated this, and based upon the current information and the individuals who have cooperated with us, and in light of the fact that several haven't, we have no basis for putting him on paid leave, and we will await the outcome of these cases before we take any further action.
Ooh.
Why not do that?
I hear you. I mean, I think that's not a bad scenario. I mean, the NFL's got to be careful here. That's for sure. I mean, I think the one thing that, like, of all the things you just said there that jumped out to me to where I went, ooh, you know, if these aren't resolved and they just let Deshaun Watson play, I just can't imagine that happening. I can't. I think the NFL is like way too hyper aware of like their standing in society and all the things that are perceived.
He hasn't been charged with a crime.
I know.
How can you do that?
I know, but
it's
I'm
innocent until proven guilty. He's not even accused of being guilty.
Mike, don't. I'm just a messenger here.
I hear you.
I know. I hear you. You're right, 100%. But I'm just going through the history of the NFL and then where we are like currently at society right now. I just don't think NFL is going to be willing to take the brunt of that every day. Wow, they're just going to let some star quarterback, because that's what it's going to get turned into. Star quarterback can do whatever he wants in that league. They don't care. He's abused women and those things. It'll take a life of its own if he's out there in the field. And that's where I think the NFL ultimately will not want to have those images out there. So this becomes the number one topic in the NFL again.
And your instincts are right, because all due respect, I've been studying this aspect of the way the league handles off-field misconduct for years.
Yeah.
It isn't always about right and wrong.
Right.
It isn't always about truth and justice. It isn't always about respecting the constitutional rights of the individuals. It's about public relations. The whole thing is about public relations. The entire personal conduct policy, the in-house justice system that has cropped up in the wake of the Ray Rice situation, where the league basically says, we're no longer going to defer to what the criminal justice system does, because sometimes they get it wrong, at least for our purposes.
Right.
They put the guy in a diversion program when there's this video lurking around of him knocking out his then fiancée. That video comes out, turns our business upside down. So it is PR driven, period. And that's why all sorts of things can happen that you would look at and say, well, it's just not fair to the individual involved, especially if the Houston Police Department has been talking to these individuals. Multiple of the 22 persons have spoken to the Houston Police Department. You're going to charge them or you're not.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'd like to think the NFL has sources around the various departments and agencies involved that they can find out which way the wind's blowing. I'd like to think they have that capacity, the resources to do that. I think it's fair to the player. The player has rights. And the player has a right to play football unless and until there's sufficient proof that he's done something that should prevent him from playing football. And that's not a comment on the merits. I'm just saying at some point.
Yeah, that's right.
At some point, it's time to go back to work.
Right.
And if you're going to keep him from working, you better have a good reason to do it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It is unfair, but that's also where the NFL goes into it's a privilege to play in this league, and we're going to protect the shield and all those type of things that we know, that we hear all the time, that we roll our eyes with sometimes. But this is exactly what they mean and where this comes from. And that's where I can't imagine it. I don't see it happening. Especially with, hashtag Me Too being so popular within the last year. There's just a lot of circumstances, in the world, in the league, that I think ultimately, if it's not decided clearly, I can't see it happening. I can't. And if
it's not just a popular hashtag. It's a long overdue reckoning.
But no doubt about it. I didn't mean to. I don't want to. I didn't mean to sound insensitive.
No. We're on the same team here. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm making sure people understand where we're coming from. There are delicate and important issues embedded within the merits of the claims being made against Deshaun Watson, and those need to be handled properly. And I've said all along, he needs to settle these cases not just to make them go away quietly. He needs to have his reckoning. He needs to make good with the people who believe that their rights were violated. And the way that you get your justice through the civil justice system is through the payment of money. That's how it works. These individuals chose initially to file a lawsuit. When you file a lawsuit, you seek the recovery of monetary damages to compensate you for what you have endured. He should, and I've said this for weeks, he should work out a fair settlement with each of those 22 individuals so they believe that their rights have been respected. That is part of this. But what we're trying to do here is separate that from the employment rights that Deshaun Watson has as it relates to the NFL. And at some point, the NFL has an obligation to get into the weeds sufficiently to make a decision, a fair decision, a proper decision, and an inherently difficult decision. Is Deshaun Watson allowed to continue to come to work while these cases are unresolved? And will we wait until they are resolved to pass final judgment on whatever unpaid suspension we would levy against him? That's the question, and we'll see what the league does. But I hope they take it seriously. I trust that they will, but I know based upon past examples, like Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, right.
I feel like they decide what they want to do.
Yeah.
And they work backward through whatever facts may dispute the end result. They work backward to justify where they want to go.
Yeah, I mean, well, listen, at the end of the day, I think the NFL is going to do what's best for the NFL. I think that's what we're saying. They're going to do whatever they deem necessary for the best of the league, the shield, all those type of things. And, yeah, with that, sometimes, personal care gets thrown by the wayside and really, yeah, basic work rights. But that's, I guess, part of what we signed as players in the CBA and things like that they're gone a little bit from that standpoint. And that's what I expect the NFL to do. So we'll see where it goes. And I just can't imagine a team, even if they do feel like they're going to get it for the low or something like that, wanting to trade. And, even for the low for Deshaun Watson is still going to be something substantial to trade and then not have these things resolved and be like, oh, well, we hope it all turns out the right way. And we hope there's not one that's ends up being serious and there's something substantial there. That's another, like, I just don't see that avenue opening up or happening. I think there might be dabbling, but I can't imagine a team actually pulling the trigger on that one.
Easy solution, if you're willing to tie up multiple picks, because they would be tied to the conditions. It's based on how many games he plays.
Yeah, sure.
This year.
Yeah.
That's it. If he plays 4 or fewer, it's this pick in 2022. If he plays, 4 to 10, it's that pick. If he plays 10 or more, it's a first rounder. You could do it. You could tie 22, 23, 24 draft picks to how many games he plays this year and next year. But the problem is, if you're the team that's trading for him, you tie your own hands as it relates to what you can do with those picks in other trades, because you got to keep them available for however the final analysis goes of the Watson deal. But the point is this. This entire conversation flows from the thing Nick Caserio said at the end of his answer. They are going to make the best decision for the Texans as they get closer to camp, which means they understand there is a decision to be made. And this thing that has gone dormant, at least as it relates to football purposes, and these assumptions we've made, we're not going to see Deshaun Watson. Those assumptions could be wrong. We may be seeing him.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.